Hey guys, what's up? Stock Retail coming back to you. Happy Monday. Happy gorgeous sunshiny day from here in Oregon. Hopefully it's nice wherever you are. Woke up this morning and was like, oh, okay, GameStop has filed the warrants as the Genesis project. So let's just talk a little bit about that. And for me, I kind of started noticing obviously some connections to a pattern from Bitcoin, which is why that's the title of this video. So this will be a pretty quick one. Just want to show you some things I see, and perhaps touch on even a little 10. Let's cover facts, but then maybe think about some 10 too. And what does this even mean? So GameStop names the warrants Project Genesis. You can kind of see that. If you go to both GameStop's investor relations site, or if you go to the SEC Edgar site, you'll kind of see, so like here's the warrant agreement that got filed. If you look at the top, you can see it's Project Genesis. Here is the name of the file, Project Genesis. So it's all there, kind of just interesting to see. And so the connection I just wanted to draw out for you, I just like the movie Uncle Buck. If you've seen Uncle Buck, maybe I won't bother explaining it, but you'll get this. Is there a little similarity there? So anyway, let's just talk about where that's coming from and why did I say that. So Bitcoin had a Genesis block, if you don't know. And I'm showing you, in fact, if you go kind of research the Genesis block, Satoshi embedded basically in that block the Times of London. And you can see on that day the paper was saying more bailouts for banks and all of that. So that was what was swirling. Obviously, we had, people call it the Great Financial Crisis, the GFC of 2008 and 2009. I was definitely there for that. I was a working professional at the time, and we all have our different memories of that. Some of you are younger than me. You watched your parents go through that. And anyway, so a lot of people sort of speculate that Satoshi was kind of saying this is in many ways the reason for the creation of Bitcoin is all that goes on with central banking. And so I don't think it's a large coincidence that he embedded this particular newspaper piece on the day he created the Genesis block. Now, what I want you to just notice that's kind of interesting is that block was mined on January 3rd. And at the time, there was basically, I think, 10 minutes between blocks in terms of there's kind of a hash rate and a difficulty setting for Bitcoin. That continues to go up with each halving. And then even as there are more nodes in the network and all of that, there's kind of like a difficulty slider in Bitcoin mining. And if you go research right now, you'll see the hash rate's at an all-time high. So it's kind of like a supply control, which is part of the thesis on Bitcoin. So go research that. But what you would find is even though the basically time between blocks at that time should have been around 10 minutes, it was on the seventh day. Now, if you know anything about the Bible, and you do not need to be a believer, then you will just pick up the obvious references. If what he called the Genesis block was mined on the 3rd of January, the next block was not until the 9th, which then is, if you count the 3rd of January as day one, that is the seventh day. So some obvious creation references, kind of interesting there. Yeah, so just kind of letting you all see that. Now you'll also notice, take a look at this 103 and this 109, right? We're going to come back to that. So first off, Bitcoin Genesis kind of being January 09, 109. I'm drawing you back to Kitty's post of 109 and 420. If you don't know, the most recent halving of Bitcoin was on 420 of 2024. So I find that interesting in terms of a connection. But there is more. So if you look at the Bitcoin Genesis being on January 3rd, GameStop now, effectively the ex-dividend date was 10/3, right? So if we just kind of move the hash around, the I don't know, slash, I guess. Anyway, 103, 103, right? So 10/3 and January 3rd, both being kind of a 103. If you didn't know, too, actually, Ryan Cohen in Gematria is a 103, so that's kind of another interesting connection there. Bitcoin, the next block, like I said, was on day 7. There's that 109. GameStop, I don't know. So I guess I'm just saying, very interesting to me that the Bitcoin Genesis block was 103, the GameStop Genesis warrants 10/3, and I don't think Ryan Cohen is for nothing naming that the Genesis project. So you kind of ask, all right, so what is the signal then? And I'm just giving you my own personal thoughts on this. This is pure speculation now. I won't even go too deep in 10. This is just like opinion. So I think it's a pretty big salute or a nod to Satoshi. I'll just even, let me go back a minute and we go back to the first slide, and this was the first salute I believe that Ryan gave, and was kind of saying, hey, Bitcoin is on the path, I'm on the Bitcoin path, etc., etc. Right? You know by now that he bought 4,710 Bitcoin. Last week I had talked about GameStop being up like $71 million in terms of gain. Bitcoin's up even more since then, so I don't know, probably $73 million ish or something in terms of gain now. So GameStop's going to do very well, having kind of gotten itself on the Bitcoin path. I believe that. And so, what is the signal then? Yes, it's a salute and a nod to Satoshi. I believe that's a personal belief. Kind of just saying what team Ryan is on in a way, in a manner of speaking. And I believe that this likely is also a signal that he is not done. Now, remember, the shelf filing happened last week, also on 10/3, so that's kind of interesting. I don't know if that's further signal of, Project Genesis being a broader thing. By the way, if you want a little more 10, there's been a lot of discussion on Project Rocket. Well, take a look at what Rocket matches in Gematria, and it has a connection to Bitcoin specifically. So that also has always been interesting to me. And whatever this is, it won't be boring. And I just want to kind of a little bit show you, if I'm not saying that I know everything. In fact, I clearly don't. There's a lot I do not understand what Ryan is doing often until after it happens. But from time to time, I'm able to spot some things. So this was a post from May 17, 2024, where I called the fact that GameStop was going to be getting into Bitcoin. There were some things I saw, some signals I saw. And so I guess you just ask, how did this guy know and call it back in May of 24 that GameStop would participate with Bitcoin? So I'm just suggesting to you, I think this means they're not done, that Ryan Cohen's got GameStop on a path, and he's chosen sort of a team or sides, if you will. And by the way, don't sleep on how big of a deal that is. Just think of all the people, especially if you've been deep in GameStop. Obviously, I've been a little more on the AMC side, but I root for all of us in retail to win. You guys know I believe in unity. And I believe in this fight against Wall Street corruption. Well, think about if you've got the central banks and the Wall Street machine, and Ryan is lining himself up with powers and forces that perhaps have been antagonistic, to say the least. And I mean that in a positive way. I would put myself in that camp in terms of being against the Wall Street and bank corruption and sort of the incestuous relationship of our regulators and our banks and our brokers and all of these market makers and all of that, right? So I do think this is perhaps further signal, and Ryan saying, hey, I've got more moves to make. So I wouldn't necessarily sleep on that. Hey, so for my AMC followers, we're kind of wrapping up here already. I know this is maybe even like, I don't know, 3 of my last 4 videos have been GameStop. That's just because there's been obviously some big news here, and I find it interesting, and I'm tracking all of this. I will come back to some deeper AMC content very soon, maybe even later today, because I've been kind of refining the Q4 forecast, so I'll do that soon. We'll do the Q3 kind of earnings deep dive, my forecast on that, now that obviously the quarter has been closed in terms of the box office. So I'll do all that soon. And like I said, I just believe in unity. I believe in the retail shareholder winning. I believe in stopping a lot of what I see as financial oppression and manipulation. And you know that I believe we will win. So let's go.